There's a quiet irony in the way we live today, surrounded by endless noise, constant distractions, and a world that never seems to slow down. Yet, buried beneath the chaos, there's an ancient philosophy that whispers a different truth. Peace isn't found by changing the world around us, but by mastering the world within. 2,000 years ago, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius stood at the helm of an empire in turmoil, and yet he wrote these words: "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the heart of Stoicism, a discipline that doesn't just endure chaos, but transforms it into clarity. But here's the problem. We've been conditioned to react, to panic, to let the turbulence of life dictate our emotions. We've learned chaos so well that peace feels foreign, almost unnatural. What if the key to tranquility isn't adding another productivity hack or escape tactic, but unlearning the habits that keep us trapped in reactivity? That's what this journey is about: breaking free from the patterns that steal our calm and rebuilding our minds with Stoic discipline. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending life is perfect. It's about recognizing that between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies our power to choose. So how do we reclaim that power? By practicing cognitive reframing, shifting how we interpret challenges, seeing them as opportunities rather than obstacles. By cultivating emotional detachment, not indifference, but the ability to observe our feelings without being ruled by them. And by honing intentional focus, directing our energy only to what we can control. These aren't abstract ideas, they're tools forged in the fires of ancient wisdom and tested by centuries of practice. This video is your guide to wielding them, because peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's the ability to stand undisturbed in the middle of it, and that's a skill worth mastering. We cling to the steering wheel of life, white-knuckled, convinced that if we just grip tighter, we can avoid every pothole and detour. But here's the uncomfortable truth: chaos isn't the exception, it's the rule. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Epictetus, born a slave and later one of history's greatest philosophers, put it bluntly: some things are within our power while others are not. His words cut through the noise of our modern anxieties like a scalpel. We waste so much energy trying to command the uncontrollable: the weather, other people's opinions, the stock market, even the mood of a stranger in line ahead of us. And in that futile struggle, we drain the very resilience we need for what truly matters. Think about the last time you sat in bumper-to-bumper traffic, fuming at the delay. Your honking won't clear the road, your frustration won't teleport you home. Yet there's an alternative. Use that time to listen to an audiobook, call a friend, or simply observe the world outside your window. That shift from resistance to acceptance isn't surrender, it's strategy. The same principle applies to workplace stress. You can't control your boss's demands or a last-minute deadline, but you can control how you prepare, how you communicate, and most importantly, how you let it affect your peace. This isn't about passive resignation. It's about redirecting your effort like a farmer who knows the difference between sowing seeds and begging for rain. So here's a challenge. Pick one thing you've been trying to control that's entirely outside your influence. Maybe it's a family member's choices or the outcome of a sports game you're obsessed with. Now imagine releasing that burden, not because you don't care, but because you finally understood your power was never there to begin with. Real freedom starts when you stop trying to hold water in your fists and instead learn to drink from the river as it flows. Seneca once wrote that the moment we start craving approval, We hand over the reins of our happiness to someone else. Picture a dog on a leash, frantically trying to please its owner, except in this case, the leash is invisible and we're the ones holding it for strangers. The Stoics called this self-imposed slavery. They didn't mean we should become cold or dismissive of others, but rather that our sense of worth must come from within, not from the ever-shifting opinions of the crowd. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly in his Meditations, "It never ceases to amaze me. We care more about what people think of us than what we think of ourselves." Fast forward to today and the stakes feel even higher. Ancient Romans worried about gossip in the forum. We face the relentless court of social media, where likes and comments act as a constant verdict on our lives. Every post, every photo, every thought shared becomes an invitation for judgment. But here's the paradox: the more we seek validation, the emptier it leaves us. Seneca saw this coming 2,000 years ago. In one of his letters, he mocked the absurdity of people-pleasing, comparing it to a musician adjusting his performance based on the coughs and whispers of a distracted audience. Why let the noise of the crowd drown out your own song? The Stoic alternative isn't arrogance or isolation, it's quiet confidence. Imagine wearing a coat in winter. If someone says it's ugly, does that suddenly make you cold? Of course not. Their opinion doesn't alter the coat's function or your need for warmth. Apply that same logic to your choices, your values, even your mistakes. The weight of external opinions only drags us down when we strap them to our backs voluntarily. So here's a practical challenge. Think of one opinion you've been carrying like a boulder. Maybe a relative's disapproval of your career path or a stranger's snide comment about your appearance. Now imagine setting it down, not with anger, but with the calm realization that their judgment was never yours to hold. That's the first step toward true freedom. Because when you stop outsourcing your self-worth, you reclaim something far more valuable, the unshakable peace of being the author of your own story. Epictetus never minced words when it came to desire. He called it a form of tyranny, one we impose on ourselves. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, he said, but in having few wants. That might sound counterintuitive in a world that equates more with better, but the Stoics saw desire differently. It wasn't about denying pleasure or living ascetically. It was about recognizing how easily our cravings enslave us, how the chase for what we don't have robs us of appreciating what we do. Take today's consumer culture. Ancient Rome had its excesses: lavish feasts, sprawling villas, the relentless pursuit of status. But compare that to the modern barrage of targeted ads, limited time offers, and the curated perfection of social media. The mechanisms have evolved, but the trap remains the same. The illusion that happiness lies just one more purchase, one more achievement, one more like away. Seneca put it starkly: it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor. The Stoic antidote: temperance, not deprivation, but discernment. It's the difference between enjoying a meal and obsessing over the next bite before you've swallowed the first. Temperance trains us to pause, to ask, is this desire serving me, or am I serving it? Imagine standing in front of your closet, packed with clothes, yet feeling like you have nothing to wear. Now picture opening a drawer with just 3 well-loved outfits, each chosen intentionally, each enough. That's the quiet freedom of mastering desire. Here's the challenge: pick one thing you've been wanting, not a basic need, but a want, something you've convinced yourself will bring satisfaction. Maybe it's the latest gadget, a promotion, or even validation from someone who doesn't value you. Now imagine releasing it, not with resentment, but with the clarity that contentment isn't out there to be found. It's in here, in the space you create when you stop chasing and start choosing. because the real luxury isn't having everything, it's needing very little. We've been sold a lie that happiness is a destination, a permanent state we can reach if we just work hard enough, buy the right things, or arrange our lives perfectly. Marcus Aurelius saw through this illusion centuries ago. He wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." Not exactly the uplifting mantra you'd find on a motivational poster, is it? But there's profound freedom in that truth. The Stoics understood that peace isn't about clinging to happiness like a life raft in a storm. It's about learning to swim in the currents of change, to recognize that joy and sorrow, gain and loss, are simply seasons of the soul. Think about nature for a moment. A tree doesn't resist autumn because its leaves are falling. It doesn't panic when winter strips its branches bare. It stands rooted, knowing spring will come again, not as a reward for endurance, but as the natural rhythm of existence. Now ask yourself, how often do we rage against our own winters? That job loss, that breakup, that unexpected setback, we treat them like errors in the system, as if life broke some unspoken promise. But what if these fluctuations aren't interruptions to our peace? What if they're the very terrain peace is built upon? Consider a time you fought against change. Maybe you held onto a relationship long past its expiration date, or clung to an old version of yourself that no longer fit. Recall the exhaustion of that resistance. Now imagine releasing it, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally trusted the process. That's the Stoic shift. Marcus didn't journal about avoiding pain. He wrote about meeting it with clear eyes, about finding strength in the understanding that nothing lasts, not our struggles, not even our joys. This isn't pessimism, it's liberation. When we stop demanding that life freeze into some perfect, static moment, we open ourselves to the full spectrum of being alive. A wave doesn't resent the tide for pulling it back. It knows retreat is part of the dance. So here's the invitation. Next time you catch yourself thinking, "I'll be happy when," pause. Breathe. Remember that happiness isn't a place to arrive at. It's the way you travel, and the road, with all its twists and turns, is the whole point. Seneca had a name for the habit of agonizing over what might go wrong. He called it borrowing trouble. Picture standing at a loan shark's counter, taking out an emotional debt you might never have to repay. That's what happens when we fixate on hypothetical futures. We suffer in advance for disasters that may never come. His advice was simple but radical. There are more things to alarm us than to harm us, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a moment. How many sleepless nights have you spent rehearsing conversations that never happened, or bracing for collapses that never came? The Stoics weren't naive optimists. They were realists who understood that most of our pain isn't forged in the fires of actual adversity. It's smelted in the furnace of our own anticipation. Modern life magnifies this tendency. We scroll job boards fearing layoffs that haven't been announced. We replay awkward moments from meetings, convinced they'll derail promotions that are months away. We even do it in relationships, steeling ourselves for breakups before the first real conflict arises. It's like carrying an umbrella every single day because it might rain, then complaining about the weight on your shoulder. The irony: when real storms hit, we're often too exhausted from all that preparation to handle them well. Here's the Stoic reframe: uncertainty isn't your enemy. It's the space where resilience grows. Imagine two farmers looking at the same cloudy sky. One obsesses over drought, the other over floods, both wasting energy on opposing fantasies. Meanwhile, the wise farmer checks the soil in front of him and adjusts today's work accordingly. That's the power of present focus. It's not about ignoring the future. It's about recognizing that the only lever you truly control is the one in your hand right now. So here's your challenge. Name one future worry you've been clutching like a talisman, maybe a looming deadline, a medical test result, or a child's college application. Now imagine placing it gently on a shelf, not because it doesn't matter, but because today's sunlight is streaming through the window, and that's where your power lies. As Seneca wrote, "The fool, with all his other faults, has this also. He is always getting ready to live. Don't let borrowed trouble rob you of the life that's already here." Marcus Aurelius left us a simple but radical thought. The past is gone, the future is uncertain. All we ever have is this fleeting moment. He wasn't dismissing history or planning. He was exposing a trap we all fall into, the weight of what's already happened. Picture a ship dragging an anchor through the ocean long after the storm has passed. That's what regret does to us. The Stoics had a name for this amor fati, the love of fate, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they understood that fighting what can't be changed is like shouting at the rain. Consider the Roman general Publius Rutilius Rufus. After a brilliant career, he was falsely accused of corruption and exiled. Most men would have crumbled under the injustice, but Rutilius did something astonishing. He didn't rage against his accusers or beg for mercy. Instead, he built a new life in exile, studying philosophy, and even refusing a later offer to return. When asked why, he replied, "The man they banished no longer exists." He wasn't denying the pain, he was choosing not to let it define him. Here's the modern parallel. That job you lost, that relationship that ended, that missed opportunity, how much mental real estate are you still paying for it? Regret tricks us into believing that if we replay the tape enough times, the ending might change. But the Stoics recognized a harder truth. The only thing we alter by dwelling on the past is our present. Marcus scribbled in his journal, "Don't let the past dictate your future. It's not your chains, it's your teacher." So here's the practice. Grab a scrap of paper and write down one regret you've been carrying, not to relive it, but to release it. Maybe it's a financial mistake or harsh words you can't take back. Now fold it tightly and tuck it away, or better yet, burn it safely. The act isn't about erasing history, it's about reclaiming your now. Because the past is a place of reference, not residence, and your life, as the Stoics knew, is waiting to be lived not in the shadows of what was, but in the light of what still can be. Our culture wears busyness like a badge of honor, answering emails during meetings, scrolling social media while watching TV, juggling 5 tabs and half a conversation simultaneously. We call it productivity. The Stoics called it madness. Seneca, the great Roman philosopher, saw this coming 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." He wasn't just criticizing distraction, he was exposing the hidden cost of our fractured attention. Every time we split our focus, we're not just dividing our time, we're diluting our presence, trading depth for the illusion of speed. Picture a chef trying to cook 3 dishes at once, darting between chopping, stirring, and flipping, only to end up with a burnt, undercooked mess. Now imagine that chef is your mind, and those dishes are your relationships, your work, your peace. That's the chaos of multitasking. Ancient Stoics practiced something radical, unitasking. Seneca would spend entire mornings writing letters without interruption, his slave instructed to turn visitors away. He wasn't being rude, he was guarding what modern science now confirms. The human brain isn't wired for parallel processing. What we call multitasking is really just rapid task switching, and each switch comes with a cognitive tax. Fast forward to today, where the average office worker toggles between applications nearly 600 times a day. We pride ourselves on this frenetic dance, mistaking motion for progress. But here's what Seneca knew. True mastery comes from consecration, not convolution. When you read a book while checking notifications, you retain less than if you'd focused fully. When you half listen to a loved one while drafting a text, you sacrifice connection for the mere appearance of availability. The Stoic alternative isn't slow motion, it's deliberate motion. So here's the challenge. Carve out 1 hour today, just 60 minutes, to do one thing with your whole mind. Maybe it's savoring a meal without screens, taking a walk without podcasts, or writing without intermittently refreshing your inbox. Notice the resistance that arises, the itch to reach for your phone, the voice insisting you're wasting time by not doubling up. That discomfort is the signal you're on the right track. Because as Seneca warned, life is long if you know how to use it. And the best way to use it isn't by cramming more in, it's by letting each moment truly count. Epictetus once posed a question that cuts through centuries of noise. If someone spoke to you the same way you speak to yourself, would you tolerate their company? The Stoics weren't just frugal with possessions, they were miserly with words, treating speech not as a reflex but as a deliberate choice. In a world drowning in hot takes and rapid-fire opinions, their discipline feels almost revolutionary. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to broadcast his thoughts but to refine them. Seneca wrote letters not to fill silence, but to distill wisdom into sentences worth carrying across continents. This wasn't antisocial behavior, it was respect for the weight language carries. Modern communication has turned this principle upside down. Ancient Rome had its gossip, but compare the forum's debates to today's endless scroll of hot takes, reaction videos, and comment section skirmishes. The average person now consumes more words before breakfast than a medieval scholar might in a week. Yet here's the paradox: the more we speak, the less we say. The Stoics measured words like gold not because they were scarce, but because their value depended on purity. As Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. A tweet can go viral while leaving no imprint on the soul. A single well-considered sentence can echo for millennia. Consider the last unnecessary conversation you had, the weather chatter with a barrister, the office small talk that circled like a carousel going nowhere. Now imagine replacing just one of those exchanges with attentive silence, not awkwardness but presence. The Stoics practiced this daily, recognizing that listening isn't passive, it's the soil where understanding grows. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, put it bluntly: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak. That ratio feels alien today, where social media rewards volume over virtue. Here's the experiment. For the next 24 hours, observe your words like an archaeologist uncovering artifacts. Before speaking, ask, is this necessary? Is it true? Does it improve upon silence? You might find entire categories of speech evaporate: complaints that change nothing, opinions no one requested, rehearsed stories that serve only to fill air. What remains won't be emptiness, but space for words that carry weight, for silence that speaks louder than chatter. Because as the Stoics knew, the quieter the mind, the louder wisdom whispers. Seneca compared unchecked emotions to wild horses, powerful, untamed, capable of carrying us forward or trampling everything in their path. His solution wasn't to kill the horses, but to take hold of the reins. That's the Stoic art of emotional discipline, not denying what we feel, but refusing to let those feelings dictate our actions. He wrote, "A man is as wretched as he has convinced himself to be." At first glance, that might sound harsh, but dig deeper, and you'll find liberation in those words. Our emotions aren't commands, they're signals, like weather vanes pointing to the winds of our inner world. The Stoics didn't preach suppression, they practiced observation. Imagine standing on a riverbank, watching leaves float by without jumping in to chase them. That's the space between feeling and reaction where wisdom grows. Take road rage, a modern epidemic. Someone cuts you off and instantly heat floods your chest, your grip tightens on the wheel, maybe even your foot presses harder on the gas. In that moment, the emotion is driving literally. But what if instead of surrendering to the surge, you paused, not to ignore the anger, but to ask, what does this reaction serve? The other driver won't hear your honking as constructive feedback. Your clenched jaw won't teach them a lesson. All that's left is your own peace, dissolving in the rearview mirror. Seneca's advice cuts through the noise. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. That driver didn't ruin your day, your interpretation did. Here's where Stoicism becomes practical. Next time frustration flares, whether in traffic, a tense meeting, or a family disagreement, try this. Exhale deeply, then count to 5. In that pause, insert a question. Is this emotion useful? If the answer is no, you've just taken back the reins. If it's yes, you've chosen your response instead of being hijacked by it. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming deliberate. Even Marcus Aurelius, shouldering the weight of an empire, reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you, so here's your challenge. Pick one situation this week where emotions usually take the wheel, maybe a coworker's criticism or your child's tantrum. When it arises, pause, breathe, ask yourself, am I reacting or am I choosing? That split second of awareness is where the wild horses learn to run with purpose, not chaos. Because mastery over emotions isn't about control, it's about clarity. And clarity, as the Stoics knew, is the birthplace of real peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote these words during a military campaign far from home. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That wasn't just poetic resilience, it was tactical wisdom from an emperor who spent nearly 2 decades defending Rome's borders. The Stoics had a radical view of comfort zones. They saw them not as safe havens, but as training grounds left unused. Consider a sword left in its scabbard, protected from nicks and weather, yes, but also dulling from disuse. Our minds work the same way. Avoid difficulty, and you don't avoid suffering. You just exchange the pain of growth for the stagnation of false safety. Modern life conspires against this truth. We have apps to skip lines, algorithms to show us only agreeable opinions, even mattresses that adjust to our every twitch. Convenience isn't the problem, it's the illusion that ease equals progress. Ancient Stoics would find our relationship with discomfort bizarre. They actively sought out voluntary hardship, sleeping on thin mats in winter, fasting for days, wearing coarse clothing, not as punishment but as mental vaccinations. Seneca described it like building calluses. Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Here's the modern equivalent of that practice. Notice how you instinctively reach for your phone when alone in an elevator or waiting in line. That reflexive reach isn't just distraction, it's avoidance of the smallest void where discomfort might whisper. Now imagine deleting one convenience app for a week, not the banking or maps you truly need, but the one that delivers gourmet meals with 2 taps. Feel that twinge of resistance. That's the edge of your comfort zone, and crossing it doesn't require climbing Everest. It starts with letting boredom exist during your commute instead of filling every second with podcasts, or having that difficult conversation you've been postponing rather than rehearsing it endlessly in your head. Marcus left us the blueprint. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He didn't write that on a peaceful retreat. He penned it on battlefields and in plague-stricken cities, proving discomfort isn't the enemy of gratitude, it's the whetstone that sharpens it. Your challenge today: identify one tiny comfort you can relinquish, the snooze button, the automatic complaint when it rains, even the extra cream in your coffee. Not to prove something, but to remember something: you're far more adaptable than your routines would have you believe, because as the Stoics knew, the obstacle isn't what blocks your path, it's the only path worth taking. Epictetus stared at the sprawling markets of ancient Rome and saw not abundance, but chains, invisible shackles forged from the belief that possessions equal security. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, he said, but in having few wants. That thought would baffle most of us today, scrolling through endless online stores at midnight, adding to carts we'll never check out, mistaking the itch of acquisition for actual need. The Stoics practiced a radical kind of minimalism long before it became a trendy lifestyle hack. For them, owning less wasn't about aesthetic simplicity. It was about reclaiming the mental space hijacked by clutter. Seneca put it sharply: it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor. Picture two travelers, one with a single sturdy backpack, the other dragging 3 overstuffed suitcases through the airport. Who moves faster? Who panics when a gate change is announced? That's the difference between Stoic detachment and modern hoarding, not just of objects, but of the anxiety they carry. Ancient philosophers could fit their belongings in a small chest. Today, we rent storage units for things we haven't seen in years. The irony: the more we accumulate, the more we have to lose, and the tighter fear grips us. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the wealthiest empire on earth, slept on a military cot to remember: comfort isn't in layers of padding, but in the ability to walk away from any of it without looking back. But here's where Stoicism surprises us: it doesn't demand austerity for its own sake. The goal isn't to mimic monks or compete in self-denial. It's to ask one piercing question: does this thing serve me, or do I serve it? Your 10-year-old blender works fine, but the new model promises a premium crushing experience. The coat rack groans under jackets you forgot you owned, yet the sale email whispers limited time offer. Consumerism thrives on manufactured dissatisfaction, convincing us that the next purchase will finally fill some unnamed void. The Stoics knew better. They recognized that void for what it really is: not a lack of stuff, but a lack of purpose. So here's the experiment: open one drawer, one closet, one cloud storage folder. Find one item you haven't touched in months: the spare phone charger coiled like a sleeping snake, the novel you pretended you'd reread, the app you downloaded and never opened. Now let it go, not with guilt, but with the quiet triumph of choosing space over storage. Because as Epictetus knew, the richest person isn't the one with the most, but the one who needs the least, and that's a form of wealth no Black Friday sale can match. Seneca once watched a wealthy senator pace his villa, muttering about a neighbor's larger estate, and wrote, "He who envies others does not enjoy himself." That observation cuts deeper today than even the Stoics could have imagined. We live in an age of curated highlight reels, where every scroll through social media is an involuntary audit of someone else's vacations, promotions, and picture-perfect mornings. The Stoics diagnosed this sickness long before Instagram existed. They called it the thief of contentment. Marcus Aurelius kept a simple reminder in his journal: how much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks. Not because he didn't care about others, but because he understood that comparison doesn't just distract us, it fractures us. The ancient solution wasn't to ignore others' achievements, but to change the ruler. Instead of measuring themselves against external benchmarks, the Stoics used an inner compass. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly: if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. That's the antidote to comparison: not chasing applause, but embracing the messy, invisible work of growth. picture two gardeners, one obsessively checking the blooms in her neighbor's yard, the other tending her soil with quiet focus. Who harvests more joy? Modern psychology confirms what Seneca knew, that envy triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain. Yet we voluntarily subject ourselves to daily doses, refreshing feeds filled with engagements we weren't invited to, promotions we didn't receive, bodies that don't mirror ours. The Stoics would have recognized this as a form of self-harm. In one of his letters, Seneca describes envy as drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. That's the futility of comparison. It burns energy we could spend mastering our own craft, all while convincing us we're falling behind an imaginary standard. Here's the practice. Grab a notebook and write down 3 things your present self has that your past self once longed for. Maybe it's a skill you've honed, a relationship you've nurtured, or simply the wisdom to appreciate small moments. That list isn't just gratitude, it's rebellion against the tyranny of more. Because the Stoics knew a secret that still holds true. The only life you're meant to outshine is the one you lived yesterday. Epictetus dropped a truth bomb that still echoes through the centuries. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Think about that for a second. 2 people can face identical circumstances. One crumbles, the other grows. What separates them isn't the event itself, but the story they wrap around it. The Stoics didn't deny suffering. They rejected the idea that suffering must define us. When a ship sinks, the water doesn't drown you. It's the inability to swim that does. Victimhood, in their eyes, wasn't about what happened to you. It was about surrendering authorship of your own narrative. Consider the Roman philosopher Musonius Rufus. Exiled to a barren island under Nero's tyranny, he didn't rage against the injustice or wallow in self-pity. He turned that rocky patch of earth into an open-air school, teaching philosophy to anyone who would listen. His students later recalled how he'd say, "If you must be imprisoned, let your mind be the one thing no jailer can shackle." That's the Stoic pivot, recognizing that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can always control what it means to us. Fast forward to today. You might not be exiled to an island, but maybe you've been sidelined at work, ghosted by a friend, or hit with an unexpected bill. The initial sting is real, but what happens next is a choice. Do you spiral into, "Why does this always happen to me?" or ask, "What does this make possible?" The first question keeps you stuck in the wreckage. The second starts building a bridge. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. Here's the reframe challenge. Pick one frustration you've been carrying like a weight, a delayed flight, a critical comment, a missed opportunity. Now jot down 3 alternate interpretations. Maybe that flight delay gave you uninterrupted reading time. That criticism highlighted an area for growth. That closed door redirected you toward something better. This isn't toxic positivity, it's strategic perspective. Because as Epictetus knew, the chains that feel heaviest are often the ones we've forgotten we hold the key to. Marcus Aurelius faced invasions, plagues, and political betrayals, yet his private writings reveal a startling calm. Ask yourself, he wrote, "Is this truly necessary?" That simple question exposes one of modernity's great illusions, the tyranny of urgency. We live in a world where inboxes scream ASAP, phones buzz with time-sensitive alerts, and every demand wears the mask of an emergency. The Stoics saw through this centuries ago. They recognized that most crises aren't fires, they're sparks we've mistaken for infernos. Consider the modern workplace. An email arrives marked urgent, and instantly your pulse quickens. But pause for a second. How many of those red-flagged messages actually require immediate action? How many are just someone else's lack of planning masquerading as your emergency? The Stoic response isn't laziness or avoidance. It's the deliberate act of triage. Marcus kept a journal entry that cuts to the core. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength lies in distinguishing between what's truly urgent and what's merely noisy. Here's the paradox. Urgency addicts us to adrenaline. We mistake the rush of last-minute scrambling for productivity, the frenzy of multitasking for effectiveness. Seneca observed this in ancient Rome, where politicians would race between meetings, boasting about their overwhelming schedules. He called it busyness as a form of laziness, avoiding meaningful work by drowning in trivial haste. Fast forward to today, where we wear "I'm swamped" like a badge of honor, as if exhaustion were evidence of importance. The Stoic antidote is disarmingly simple. Next time a crisis lands in your lap, whether it's a midnight work message or a social media controversy demanding your outrage, ask Marcus's question: is this necessary? Then add two more. What happens if I wait an hour, a day? You'll discover most deadlines are arbitrary, most emergencies imaginary. The few real ones will still be there after a deep breath. Try this experiment today. Pick one thing on your to-do list screaming for attention: the project with the artificial deadline, the text that needs an instant reply. Approach it not with panic, but with purposeful slowness. Notice how the world doesn't collapse when you respond instead of react. That space between stimulus and action. That's where Stoic calm lives, and in that calm you'll find something extraordinary: the clarity to do less but better. Seneca wrote letters that could have been penned yesterday. To his friend Lucilius, he warned, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach." That wasn't just polite advice. It was survival strategy in a world where relationships could uplift or unravel a life. The Stoics didn't see friendships as passive connections, but as active choices with real consequences for inner peace. They understood something modern science now confirms: emotions are contagious. Spend an hour with a chronic complainer, and your own outlook dims. Share space with someone grounded in gratitude, and your resilience grows. Consider the Roman dinner party, a scene of laughter and debate, but also subtle power plays and ego battles. Seneca described toxic companions as emotional vampires long before the term existed. He wrote of men who'd leave you more anxious than when they arrived, their worries seeping into your pores like smoke clinging to fabric. Fast forward to today's digital equivalent: the friend who texts doomsday headlines at midnight, the coworker who turns every coffee break into a grievance session, even the social media account that leaves you restless after scrolling. The mechanisms have changed, but the toll remains the same. Each interaction either deposits energy or withdraws it from your mental reserves. Boundary setting wasn't a buzzword for the Stoics, it was oxygen. Epictetus, who taught in a city teeming with distractions, told his students, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to externals." That included tolerating disapproval for distancing from draining relationships. Imagine a Stoic version of modern ghosting, not out of rudeness, but preservation. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury," he wasn't advocating passive aggression. He was outlining emotional sovereignty, refusing to let another's toxicity dictate your inner climate. Here's the modern application. Think of one person in your life who consistently leaves you feeling depleted. Not someone going through a temporary rough patch, but a perpetual storm cloud. Now ask Seneca's question, does this relationship make me better or worse? If the answer stings, remember setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The Stoics weren't isolationists. They cultivated deep bonds with those who sharpened their wisdom like iron against stone. Your challenge: audit one connection this week with brutal honesty. Not every relationship needs to end, but each deserves conscious evaluation. Because as Seneca knew, peace isn't just something you find, it's something you protect. Epictetus looked at the undisciplined life and saw something worse than chaos. He saw wasted potential. First say to yourself what you would be, he advised, and then do what you have to do. That simple directive cuts through 20 centuries of human procrastination. The Stoics didn't just philosophize about grand ideals. They engineered their days like architects building cathedrals, brick by intentional brick. Consider the morning ritual of Marcus Aurelius, who began each dawn by reminding himself what qualities he aimed to embody before his feet even touched the floor. Or Seneca, who meticulously divided his days into learning, teaching, and reflecting, not as vague aspirations, but as non-negotiable appointments with himself. Modern life has inverted this wisdom. We wake to notifications that hijack our attention before we've had a sip of water, stumble through days dictated by others' urgencies, and wonder why exhaustion feels like the default setting. The average person now checks their phone within 5 minutes of waking, not to set intention, but to surrender it. Ancient Stoics would find this baffling. They treated time as the one currency you can't earn back, yet we fritter away hours doom-scrolling while complaining we're too busy to live deliberately. Here's the radical truth Epictetus uncovered. Chaos isn't the absence of structure, it's the presence of competing, unexamined priorities. Picture two gardeners. One wakes each morning reacting to whatever weed or pest catches their eye, perpetually putting out fires. The other follows a seasonal plan, knowing precisely when to prune, plant, and fertilize. Both are busy, but only one cultivates abundance. That's the difference between a Stoic's day and the modern whirlwind of productivity. So let's bridge ancient wisdom with modern reality. Tonight, before sleep, try this. Grab any scrap of paper and divide tomorrow into 3 buckets: what nourishes you, reading, creating, moving; what serves others, work, deadlines, family time; and what sharpens your mind, learning, reflection. Assign them blocks like appointments with your future self, not to cram more in, but to filter out the noise masquerading as necessity. Because as Seneca wrote, life is long if you know how to use it, and using it begins with designing your days like the Stoics designed their legacies, one intentional hour at a time. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome during wars, plagues, and betrayals, yet his private writings reveal a man at peace with imperfection. The cucumber is bitter. Then throw it out. There are brambles in the path, then go around. He wrote, notice what he didn't say. Wait for sweeter cucumbers. Demand someone clear the path. The Stoics didn't view ideal conditions as prerequisites for peace. They saw them as illusions. Imagine a gardener refusing to plant until every variable, the soil pH, the rainfall, even the angle of sunlight, aligns perfectly. The seasons would pass, the plot would lie barren, and the gardener would starve waiting for a fantasy. That's the trap of perfectionism, mistaking preparation for progress. Modern life amplifies this fallacy. We tell ourselves we'll start that business after we save more money, mend that relationship when we're less busy, or pursue happiness once everything falls into place. Meanwhile, the world keeps turning. Consider the shift to remote work. How many of us wasted energy resenting interruptions, delivery doorbells, barking dogs, children's voices instead of adapting? The Stoic approach flips the script. Those imperfections become part of the training ground. Epictetus, who taught in a noisy marketplace full of hecklers, didn't beg for silence. He used the chaos to sharpen his focus, telling students, "The louder they shout, the calmer you must become. There's profound freedom in this mindset." A musician doesn't curse a cracked string, she retunes. A sailor doesn't rage against shifting winds, he adjusts the sails. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily, writing, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think, not as morbid fatalism, but as urgent permission to stop postponing life until some mythical right time. Think of an oak tree growing on a windy cliff. Its roots don't lament the lack of soft soil, they grip the rock tighter. Its branches don't resist the gusts, they bend and grow stronger from the tension. That's Stoic resilience, not the absence of storms, but the wisdom to grow through them. So here's your challenge. Identify one condition you've been treating as an obstacle, a cramped workspace, a lack of resources, even your own perceived shortcomings. Instead of resisting it, ask, how could this very limitation become my teacher? Because as Marcus discovered, the perfect moment to begin isn't someday. It's now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are. Epictetus asked his students a question that still resonates today. If someone took your cloak, would you say they took you? His point was simple yet revolutionary. We are not the roles we play, the titles we hold, or the labels others stick to us. The Stoics practiced what modern psychology now calls cognitive diffusion, the art of observing our identities without being fused to them. Imagine standing before a closet full of costumes. You might wear a doctor's coat one day, a parent's sweater the next, but underneath, you're neither the fabric nor the function. That's the freedom of non-attachment Marcus Aurelius hinted at when he wrote, "Throw away your books, stop letting yourself be distracted." He wasn't anti-learning, he was warning against mistaking the tools for the craftsman. Modern life turns this wisdom upside down. We introduce ourselves by job titles at parties, measure self-worth through LinkedIn endorsements, and crumble when layoffs strip away professional identities like peeling off skin. The Stoics saw this coming. Seneca observed wealthy Romans who'd built entire personalities around political offices, only to become nobodies when elections didn't go their way. He wrote, "What fortune has made yours is not your own." Fast forward to today's identity crises: the entrepreneur who feels worthless after a failed startup, the athlete depressed after retirement, even the social media influencer whose mood swings with follower counts. The pattern hasn't changed, the stakes have just gone digital. Here's the experiment Epictetus would prescribe. For one day, describe yourself without using any roles or labels. Not "I'm a manager," but "I'm someone who enjoys solving puzzles." Not "I'm a mother," but "I'm a person who finds joy in nurturing growth." Feel the difference. One version boxes you in, the other leaves room to breathe. The Stoics weren't suggesting we abandon responsibilities, they were reminding us that titles are tools, not tethers. Like a painter who knows she's more than her brush, or a writer who understands he's not defined by his pen. So next time you feel your pulse quicken because someone mispronounces your job title or forgets your credentials, remember Epictetus' cloak. They might take the fabric, but they can't take the hand that wears it unless you let them. Seneca watched a nobleman twist himself into knots at a dinner party, laughing too loudly at stale jokes and nodding along with opinions he privately despised. Later, he wrote to his friend Lucilius, "The applause of the crowd is but the clatter of chains." That brutal truth slices through centuries of social conditioning. We've been taught that likability is currency, that saying yes earns approval, while boundaries invite rejection. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. Integrity, they argued, isn't the opposite of popularity, it's the foundation of real connection. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his Meditations: it's silly to try to escape other people's faults. They are inescapable, just try to escape your own. Fast forward to today's open office landscapes, where water cooler politics and Slack-channel diplomacy drain more energy than actual work. Picture Sarah from marketing, who never turns down a last-minute request even when swamped, or David in accounting, who stifles dissenting opinions to keep meetings harmonious. Their compliance doesn't earn respect, it teaches others to expect their silence. Seneca diagnosed this centuries ago. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The fear of being disliked weighs heavier than the reality ever could. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics practiced: that chronic people-pleasing isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment wrapped in virtue. Every suppressed no erodes self-trust, while every strategic yes to your own values builds resilience. Epictetus, who endured slavery before teaching emperors, had zero patience for approval-seeking. If someone told you that a certain person spoke ill of you, don't defend yourself against the story, but reply, "He must not know my other faults, or he would have mentioned those too." That's the antidote to people-pleasing, not arrogance, but amused detachment from others' fleeting judgments. So here's your challenge. Before lunch today, practice one act of quiet assertiveness. Maybe it's declining a meeting that could be an email, or finally voicing that dissenting opinion in the brainstorm. Notice the sky doesn't fall. Colleagues don't gasp. The world adjusts to your boundaries far faster than you'd feared, because as Seneca knew, trying to please everyone is like chasing shadows. You'll exhaust yourself catching nothing but air. True influence begins when you stop trading your peace for applause. Marcus Aurelius carried the weight of an empire, yet his private writings reveal a man who refused to carry grudges. "The best revenge," he wrote, "is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That wasn't passive resignation, it was tactical wisdom from a leader who understood that unforgiveness chains us to the past while the offender walks free. The Stoics didn't view forgiveness as weakness or approval of wrongdoing. They saw it as an act of self-liberation, like cutting anchor from a ship that's been stuck in harbor too long. Seneca put it bluntly: anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. History offers a striking example in the Roman general Scipio Africanus. After defeating Carthage in the Punic Wars, he had every reason to harbor bitterness. His father and uncle had died in that decades-long conflict. Yet when his rival Cotto demanded Carthage's complete destruction, Scipio argued for mercy. Not because he forgot the past, but because he refused to let it dictate Rome's future. That's the Stoic distinction. Forgiveness isn't about rewriting history, it's about reclaiming your present. Think of resentment like carrying a backpack filled with rocks up a mountain. Each grudge adds another stone: the coworker who took credit for your idea, the relative who betrayed your trust, the stranger who cut you off in traffic. The weight isn't punishing them, it's straining your own shoulders. Marcus captured this in his Meditations. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Here's a practice the Stoics would endorse. Take paper and pen, not your phone, not a keyboard, and write a letter to someone who wronged you. Detail the hurt, the anger, the lingering sting. Then fold it twice and tuck it away or safely burn it. This isn't about confrontation or reconciliation. It's about transferring that weight from your mind to the page, where it can't whisper to you in quiet moments. Because as the Stoics knew, forgiveness isn't something we do for others. It's the gift we give ourselves when we finally stop paying for their mistakes with our peace. Epictetus cut through the fog of indecision with a blade of clarity. First say to yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you have to do. That simple directive exposes the heart of Stoic decision-making. It's not about weighing endless options, but aligning every choice with an unwavering inner compass. The Stoics didn't suffer from decision fatigue because they'd already done the hard work upfront, defining what mattered. Imagine two travelers at a crossroads. One stares at the signs, paralyzed by which path might offer better scenery or smoother terrain. The other walks forward without hesitation, not because she knows the destination, but because she trusts her ability to navigate whatever comes. That's the power of principles over preferences. Modern life turns this wisdom upside down. We face more daily decisions than a medieval king: what to watch, where, eat, click, yet rarely pause to ask, what kind of person does this choice reflect? The average adult makes 35,000 conscious decisions a day, from the trivial skim or whole milk to the tectonic quit or stay. No wonder we're exhausted. The Stoics would have diagnosed this as a crisis of priority, not possibility. Seneca saw it in wealthy Romans who agonized over furniture arrangements while their character crumbled. They are preoccupied with the question of what kind of marble they should use for their walls, but never the question of what kind of life they should build. Here's the radical alternative they practiced: virtue-based filtering. Before any significant choice, the Stoics asked not what's easiest or what benefits me, but what aligns with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this when facing battlefield decisions. His journal reveals a man less concerned with tactics than with ensuring his actions reflected integrity. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's the litmus test when torn between options. The Stoic doesn't ask which is safest, but which is truest. Consider the modern equivalent. You're offered a lucrative job that conflicts with your ethics. The conventional approach might list pros and cons: salary versus soul. The Stoic approach cuts deeper. Does this allow me to remain the person I respect? No spreadsheet needed, or take smaller moments: the decision to check your phone during dinner. The question isn't will anyone notice, but does this reflect the attentive partner I aim to be? Principles turn choices from burdens into confirmations of who you've already decided to become. So here's your challenge. Tonight, name one core principle you refuse to compromise: not a goal or preference, but a bedrock value like honesty, growth, or compassion. Write it down, post it where you'll see it daily, then watch what happens next time a decision looms. The chaos of indecision doesn't stand a chance against the clarity of conviction. Because as Epictetus knew, when you're certain of your North Star, every path forward becomes an act of alignment, not just selection. Seneca warned his friend Lucilius about a peculiar kind of poverty, not of money, but of attention. Men are frugal in guarding their personal property, he wrote, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. The Stoics treated focus like precious metal, to be spent only on what truly enriched the soul. Fast forward 2,000 years and we've inverted their wisdom. Where ancient Romans had occasional distractions: a noisy marketplace, an overlong banquet, we swim in an ocean of digital noise, drowning in notifications, autoplay videos, and endless scroll. The average person now touches their phone over 2,000 times a day, fragmenting attention into smaller and smaller shards. Seneca would have recognized this not as progress, but as a crisis of the inner life. Consider the difference between two types of hunger. One is the body's natural signal for nourishment. The other is the compulsive snacking brought on by boredom or stress, eating without needing to, simply because food is within reach. That's exactly what happens to our minds in the digital age. We've confused stimulation with sustenance, mistaking the constant drip of information for actual wisdom. The Stoics practiced something radical by today's standards, intentional emptiness. Seneca deliberately scheduled do-nothing hours, not as wasted time, but as fertile ground for original thought. He described it as leisure that cultivates the soul. Modern neuroscience confirms what these philosophers intuited, that creativity and insight arise in the spaces between inputs, not during the inputs themselves. Think of your brain as a snow globe. Constant shaking keeps the flakes swirling in chaos. Only when set down does the water clear, allowing you to see through to what matters. Yet we shake our mental snow globes hundreds of times daily, checking apps reflexively, filling every quiet moment with podcasts or playlists, terrified of stillness. Here's the challenge Epictetus might issue: for one waking hour today, disconnect completely. Not just putting your phone face down, but silencing all screens, no background TV, no sneaking glances at work emails. Notice what arises. At first, there's restlessness, the itch to reach for digital comfort. Then, if you wait long enough, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to settle like that snow globe. Thoughts grow clearer, observations sharpen. You might even hear your own voice again, the one that gets drowned out by the digital chorus. That voice was what the Stoics called your inner citadel, and its walls grow stronger every time you choose depth over distraction. Because as Seneca knew, the richest moments aren't measured in clicks or likes, but in the unbroken silence where true understanding takes root. Marcus Aurelius once scribbled a question in his journal that cuts through 2,000 years of human busyness. Ask yourself at every moment, busy with what? That simple interrogation exposes the heart of Stoic productivity, not how much we do, but why we do it. The emperor wasn't dismissing effort, he was challenging the illusion that motion equals progress. Picture two blacksmiths. One hammers relentlessly on cold iron, mistaking sweat for skill. The other strikes fewer blows, but each lands precisely when the metal's heat is perfect. Both are busy, but only one is forging something of value. Modern hustle culture has inverted this wisdom. We wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor, cramming calendars with back-to-back meetings and boasting about inbox zero while our inner lives gather dust. The Stoics would have recognized this as theater performance without purpose. Seneca saw it in 1st century Rome, where politicians raced between appointments just to be seen as indispensable. He called it the busyness of the distracted, writing, "They are preoccupied with being busy, not with being effective." Fast forward to today's productivity porn, the apps that gamify task completion, the LinkedIn posts fetishizing 80-hour weeks, the glorification of grinding as if exhaustion were a virtue. Here's the Stoic reframe: true productivity isn't measured in output but in alignment. Marcus wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." That's the litmus test. Does this activity serve your growth or just your ego? Does it contribute to your inner citadel or just your external image? Consider the modern worker who spends hours crafting the perfect email signature while neglecting meaningful work, or the student who color codes notes instead of engaging with the material. Activity masquerading as achievement. The antidote isn't laziness, it's ruthless prioritization. The Stoics practiced something radical by today's standards. They scheduled empty space. Not for scrolling or multitasking, but for what Seneca called otium leisure that cultivates depth. Imagine a gardener who understands that constant watering drowns roots. Growth requires intervals of dryness too. So here's your challenge. Pick one productive habit you've been clinging to, maybe checking emails first thing, attending unnecessary meetings, or compulsively organizing your workspace. Now hold it up to Marcus's question. Busy with what? Does this act sharpen your mind or just soothe your anxiety about appearing busy? The answer might surprise you. Because as the Stoics knew, a life crammed with motion but empty of meaning isn't productivity, it's the most exhausting form of delay. Epictetus drew a line in the sand of human ambition with one piercing question: is this within my power or not? That simple divide between what's truly ours to command and what merely happens to us shatters the modern myth of success. The Stoics watched Roman elites chase titles, wealth, and applause, only to crumble when fate snatched those prizes away. Their conclusion: a real success isn't collected, it's cultivated, as Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal while ruling the known world. The fruit of this life is good character and acts for the common good. Not conquest, not trophies, not the fickle cheers of crowds who'd turn on him by sunset. Fast forward to today's dopamine-driven hustle culture, where followers equate to influence and net worth gets mistaken for self-worth. We've built entire industries around optimizing external metrics, social media algorithms that reward outrage, workplaces that celebrate burnout, even self-help gurus selling success blueprints as if life were a paint-by-numbers kit. The Stoics would have recognized this as a grand illusion. Seneca saw it in his wealthy students who'd amass villas and slaves yet still feel empty. What difference does it make how much you have? What you do not have amounts to much more. Here's the uncomfortable truth they uncovered: applause is addictive but meaningless. Like a child chasing soap bubbles, the harder you grasp for external validation, the faster it vanishes. Epictetus, who taught in a noisy marketplace full of hecklers, put it bluntly: if someone turned your body over to just any person who happened to meet you, you'd be furious. But you turn over your mind to anyone who comes along, so they may abuse it, leaving it disturbed and troubled. Aren't you ashamed of that? That's the cost of outsourcing your self-assessment. You become a marionette jerked by invisible strings. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies show lottery winners return to baseline happiness within months, while paraplegics adapt to their new normal similarly fast. Why? Because satisfaction lives in interpretation, not circumstance. Picture two climbers, one fixated on planting a flag at the summit, the other attentive to each foothold's texture. The first might reach the top only to wonder, now what? The second finds purpose in the climb itself. That's the Stoic shift. Success stops being a finish line and becomes the quality of your stride. So here's your rebellion against status anxiety. Grab any scrap of paper and write 3 personal metrics no one can revoke. Maybe it's your capacity to listen deeply, your commitment to morning pages, or how quickly you course correct after losing patience. Not resume bullets, but soul measurements, because as Epictetus knew, the only applause that matters echoes from the quiet corners of your own conscience, and that standing ovation can't be cancelled. Seneca would rise before dawn, light a single oil lamp, and sit with a question few of us dare to ask in our rushed mornings: what challenge will today bring, and how will I meet it? This wasn't idle reflection, it was mental armor being strapped on before battle. In letters to his friend Lucilius, he described these quiet hours as fortifying the soul before the siege of the day. The Stoics didn't just wake up, they armed up. While we grope for snooze buttons and scroll through notifications, they were preparing to face chaos with eyes wide open. Marcus Aurelius left us his own battle plan in Meditations. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Notice what he didn't say: check your emails, panic about the to-do list. His first thought was a deliberate recalibration of perspective, like a blacksmith tempering steel before shaping it. Modern mornings have become reactive. Alarms jolt us into defense mode. News alerts flood our nervous systems before we've taken a full breath, and by the time we've gulped down coffee, we're already 3 mental steps behind. The Stoics would have recognized this as surrendering before the day even began. Seneca warned, "Every day is a little life, every morning is a new birth." What we do in those first moments doesn't just set the tone, it becomes the tone. Imagine two soldiers preparing for battle. One scrambles to find his sword as the enemy charges. The other has already sharpened his blade, surveyed the terrain, and steadied his breath. Both face the same fight, but only one enters it with agency. Here's the radical simplicity of a Stoic morning. 5 minutes, 3 questions. First, what's within my control today? Not the traffic, not your boss's mood, just your preparation, your responses, your focus. Second, what challenge might arise and how can I meet it with virtue? Maybe it's a difficult conversation or a tedious task. Premeditation turns obstacles into opportunities. Finally, who can I serve today? Even Marcus, the most powerful man in Rome, began his days reminding himself he existed for others, writing, "I rise to do the work of a human being." Your challenge tomorrow, before reaching for your phone, sit with these questions for just 5 minutes. No journal required, no perfect setting, just you and the quiet. At first, it might feel like whispering into a storm, but soon you'll notice something shifts. The days don't get easier, you get clearer. Because as Seneca proved while advising emperors and facing exile, the morning isn't just a time. It's the first move in the chess game of your life, and Stoics always play to win. Chaos doesn't disappear when we seek peace, it simply loses its power to disturb us. That's the Stoic secret hidden in plain sight. Tranquility isn't found by controlling the storm around us, but by steadying the helm within. Throughout history, from the battlefields where Marcus Aurelius penned his meditations to the bustling marketplaces where Epictetus taught, one truth remains: the world will always have its turbulence. The real work isn't out there, it's in here, in the space between what happens and how we choose to meet it. Think of acceptance as the anchor in this practice, not passive resignation, but clear-eyed recognition that some winds can't be commanded, only navigated. Focus becomes our compass, training the mind to direct energy where it matters most, like a gardener watering roots instead of chasing rain. Detachment is the sail that keeps us from being blown off course by every emotional gust, while intentionality is the map we draw anew each day, deciding what merits our limited time and attention. Together, these aren't just tools, they are the architecture of an unshakable inner citadel. Epictetus, who knew firsthand how quickly fortune could turn, left us with this liberating thought: no man is free who is not master of himself. That mastery isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's the choice to pause when provoked, to breathe before reacting, to ask, is this mine to carry? Before shouldering another's expectations. And the beauty of Stoicism, you don't need a philosopher's robe or a quiet villa to begin. Start small. Tonight, reflect on one moment when chaos tugged at your peace. Was it the interrupted plan, the harsh word, the unexpected delay? Now imagine meeting it not with resistance but with curiosity. What does this reveal about where I'm still chained? Your invitation is simple but profound. Pick one practice from this journey: morning reflection, a pause before speaking, or even just a single deliberate no to an unnecessary demand, and let it be your first stone in rebuilding a life of purpose. Because peace was never the absence of noise. It's the stillness that grows when we stop fighting the waves and learn to sail them. If this wisdom resonated with you, join our community, hit subscribe, and let's keep unlearning chaos together, one mindful step